I am so excited that we are doing this. Thank you, Andrea, for coming back on the channel. This is de facto episode 2 of your French learning journey because we already had a recording with you. I'll put a link up here for people who haven't seen it. And we recorded that video with you in 2019. In fact, it was released on August the 10th,
Oh my
2019,
gosh.
and it is now August the 4th, 2024. So we look significantly older, both of us, I'm sure, but we've also made significant progress. And especially you, since I hear you have recently passed your B2 French degree, and we get to document your entire French learning journey from the beginning all the way to B2. And it's the longest duration of a journey that I will have documented up until this point, because it's basically over 5 years. When we recorded the first one, you were mostly sharing about your experience with the roadmap to fluency that I made for you. So August 10 was when we first met, 2019, and then I made your roadmap, and then you decided to join the French Fluency Accelerator, which was just started in September of 2019. So you were a founding member. It still exists, still going strong, still growing. It's 5 years old now, so yay! So happy about that. And yeah, you were in the French Accelerator for 3 years from 2019 to 2022. So thank you for being such a great member. But you didn't quit speaking French or studying French in 2022, as evidenced by the fact you are now the proud owner of the B2 certificate. So yeah, maybe I try to summarize a little bit what you said in the previous episode, because, for the people who haven't watched it yet, you were mostly saying that before working with me, you had studied a little bit with apps and done some Duolingo, something which is a very common experience, and not really learning to build sentences or have conversations, just learning how to answer the questions in Duolingo. And then due to working with me and joining the French Fluency Accelerator and learning with your fellow students in the program, you had practically overhauled your way of learning French completely and taking more responsibility in choosing things that you learn, also following the roadmap and of course my guidance, but and also just actually having conversations and actually learning to make sentences. And apparently you learned successfully because all the way to the B2 certificate, which you were just telling me about offline, and I was like, okay, let's get online and talk about it. So can you tell us what you've been doing, especially since 2022? Or could
Yeah.
could you maybe tell us what happened between 2019, the last recording, and 2022? So all of the time that you were in the French Accelerator, and also what else you did.
Yeah. I don't know if I went over this in 2022, but even before that, I had
Well,
two.
we recorded in 2019 last time,
Okay,
so
2019.
you can't have said
Okay.
anything after that date.
Well, before that, I had long time ago. I had
Mm-hmm.
2 years of French in high school,
Right. So that
two
was
years,
definitely before 2019.
right, and
Right.
two
Okay.
years of French and at the university at Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I had 20-year break.
Right.
Um, And then right before I joined French, about a few months before that is when I was doing the Duolingo and all of that. Um, and then, man, I guess, I had I had a private tutor I had hired about the time I um, joined French Fluency
Right.
and
Thibaut, right?
Thibaut.
You mentioned
Yeah.
him. You mentioned him in the previous episode. So.
Yeah, so I actually met with him once a week for a while, and
Mhm.
he pushed me hard. And
Mhm.
sometimes I would take a little break because I couldn't deal with that.
So
He
he was more pushy than me in the teaching style. Is that what you mean?
yes, he pushed me. So I would say that after 2022, just continued with Thibaut, continued with the French bath. And
Every
I,
day?
I eventually went from listening mainly to music.
Right.
Um, and I love music, and that's appropriate, I think, to have as your French bath when you're learning early,
Mm-hmm.
an
I
early
would
bit.
agree. Yeah.
But at some point, if you are mainly listening to music for your French bath, it gets too comfortable. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you
Yeah.
don't get you don't get pushed.
It's not
But
as
it's
challenging as things like
yeah.
series or the news or videos, things like that,
Right.
or podcasts.
So I converted to listening to podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
still with music,
Right.
when I would want to, but I would add podcasts, and I also added listening to Sirius XM channel 170, which is the news station out of Montreal. Now I realize it's Quebecois, and so
It's
there is,
French.
yeah,
It's a
it's
different
French.
kind of French, but it is,
There's
similar
a little
enough that it
bit of a
counts.
different accent, yeah,
Yes.
but it's newscast Quebecois, which is
Mm-hmm.
very different from, when you hear
Right.
newscasters, they have a very different way of speaking than most people. So I listened to that every morning, and that led me to going to Montreal and Quebec City. In Quebec City, I felt like I spoke more French in Quebec City than I was forced to when I was in France, to be perfectly honest. Hot take.
Okay. It's not that hard to take. I think it's relatively widely acknowledged that people in Quebec tend to be more proud of their language and more insistent on having people speak
Hmm.
French than in France. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the other thing I started doing, is forcing myself into situations where I had to use my French.
Right.
And so travel was one way to do that. Trying to and then I started, did I talk about this last time? I started doing a podcast.
I don't think so. It wasn't mentioned in the previous testimonial. I do believe that you did it while you were in the French
Hmm.
Accelerator because I remember you telling us about that, but it was not officially put out. So tell us about it, please.
So started to I back years ago on Twitter. Um
Hmm.
One of my big interests, as you see in my background, is football and
Right.
American football, um, and specifically Clemson.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think I put on my roadmap is that interest. And we talked, and we're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's a really going to be a hard thing to find in French." And I thought so at the time, and it
You can
was.
find some, probably not a lot. That
Right,
that would be my take.
right. So on Twitter, I is where I use a lot of my sports social media, I would say. And so years ago on Twitter, I was putting things in French about Clemson football. Just,
Hmm.
I don't know why. I just did.
Tweeting in French as part of your
Yeah.
French practice, which is a great
Yeah.
way to practice French. Yes.
So somebody found me that his name is Jojo.
Hmm.
He found me, and he talked me into doing a podcast with him in French. Now Jojo, at the time, did not speak any English besides the word hello. Like,
Wow.
hello.
And how good was your French at the time? Can you like
Oh,
characterize it just so we have an idea?
it was probably, I would say, more A2
Okay.
uh than it wasn't complete beginner, but it wasn't what I'm at now.
Right. So that
And
was the point basically where you decided to push yourself out of your comfort zone, to tweet in French, to speak French, to go to travel in Quebec,
right,
just like to try to push out of the basically intermediate plateau that you had at that point, right?
right. And speaking French definitely was harder for me to find opportunities to do versus writing and reading and listening. So that was my weakest portion, and probably still is. But so I don't know. I met with him on Skype, and we talked about it. And
In French, because his English was hello, which is
in
impressive.
my very broken French, and his wife does speak English, so she came in a couple of times and translated a little bit for us at that time. But anyways, he's very persuasive. I will say that he must be a salesman.
Sounds like it.
He ended up talking me into doing this podcast. So right before the podcast started, he said, he has another friend that likes Clemson that is Belgian, who speaks French and a little bit of English and who would wanted to be part of the podcast. His name's Pierre.
Mhm.
So me, Jojo, and Pierre launched this podcast. I believe we will be doing our 4th season starting in 2 weeks.
Wow, you're still doing it.
Still doing it.
Wow, so
Yeah.
impressive. And so how often is that podcast? Can you give us the link so I put it in the
Yes, yes.
description so people can check it out?
I'll send that to you. That pushed me, and to be perfectly honest, a lot of the early episodes are me just smiling nervously and saying a few
Mhm.
things here and there, and trying to follow along because this is going from recorded French that is polished and like for TV or films or
Right.
you know things of that nature to hearing a real French person talk
Mhm.
live
Yeah.
very fast and contracting the words like
Right.
you know and that helped a lot. That helped just that interaction with listening and definitely helped me with speaking. And I will say, and for my portion, a lot of it was me prepping and having notes on a separate screen. And you'll see some of the episodes where you see I'll look to the side while I'm sort of reading my notes, but then we would get in conversation and I didn't have notes for
Right.
whatever they were asking me. But that definitely I did that and that helped and I would say any opportunity you have to force yourself and not get comfortable, and you have to be a little bit crazy to do something
Mhm.
like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like all of my practice, I insist on creating a safe space so that it doesn't take as much craziness. It depends a little bit on your personality, but for someone like you who's extroverted and adventurous, definitely I recommend getting a bit crazy because, I mean, fundamentally, yes, it sounds scary to make a podcast in French, but the worst thing that can happen is that it's a failure and it's never published.
Right.
It won't kill you, right? Yeah,
No,
like
no,
it's
it won't
a
kill
bit
you.
less dangerous than being abroad alone, perhaps
Right.
somewhere where you would have to find food or whatnot, you know?
Right. Well, and so speaking of that, so I touched on travel and I love to travel. So this was
Yeah.
kind of an excuse thing, telling my husband, "Hey, I'm learning French, so to help, we're gonna travel to France a lot." Um, one of the things I did was during COVID, I went to take a river cruise up the Rhone,
Oh wow,
and
cool.
the company required a negative COVID test like within 2 days
Right.
of
Yeah, I
launching.
remember those requirements.
Yeah. So I would say to your point about being kind of in a country trying to find food, well, it wasn't food. I had to go to a
Trying to
pharmacy.
find a negative COVID test. That is worse
Right.
than food.
Right. Having to
And then you have a
go,
deadline.
I did. And I paid for this cruise and I wouldn't be
Right,
able to go.
right.
So going to a pharmacy and pushing myself, I could have gone to a pharmacy, got a negative test in the US, and then went, but I wanted to go early to
Yeah.
spend some time in Marseille. And finding a pharmacy and navigating that completely in French
Yes. And you couldn't
was
prepare for it. That was definitely not on your roadmap because when we wrote your roadmap, there was no COVID. Sometimes life is weird like that.
that that was probably the scariest thing I've ever done in French.
Yeah, that sounds scary. Mm.
But we
But
did it.
clearly you made it because you went on that cruise.
I
So
did.
it means you succeeded.
I did. I did. But yeah, so really the rubber hit the road last fall.
Mhm.
Tebow said to me, I mean, Tebow's Tebow. Tebow
Right.
said, Oh,
Thibaut does not like say nice things unless it's really, really deserved, I guess.
Tebow, Tebow, if you're watching this, I apologize for my imitation of your accent, but I'm going to try to do it. He goes, "Oh, Andrea, you need a target. You need a goal. You need something to shoot for. You are just staying in place." I said, "Okay, Tebow, what's that? What should I shoot for?" Right? Full disclosure, I have no plans to move to France or Canada. I have a job here in the US. I would love to move to France and Canada and get a job there, but that's not really a short-term goal that I would shoot for.
It's really not
Like,
easy, especially as you know you have a career, you have degrees and so on, and those just
right,
don't transfer very easily. So yeah,
exactly. And I have family here
yeah,
that at this
that
point
too.
they really need us around. So, um, I know a lot of people have different circumstances where their goal is that
Mhm.
moving, but that's not one of the things
Right.
pushing me. And and I said, "What's that, Tebow? What what do you want? What do you think?" He goes, you take the DELF." I said, "Okay." So I started looking into it, and they only offer it 3 times a year.
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
So I said to him, I said, "Okay, so I'm not going to do it in December because we were having the conversation like in November." I said, "Next month is
That was
not
even probably too late to even
to
register for it. You
register."
have to register like at least 6 weeks in advance or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then I said, and then March, I'm not going to do March because I had a trip planned around that time. And I said, I'm just not going to do that. But June's the next one. I'm going to do June, Tebow. We'll shoot for June. He said, "Okay." He said, "When do you want to really start training for this?" I'm the type of person that needs to process and sit on
Right.
things for a while. I don't typically just jump right in. I said after the first year. So I kind of gave myself the rest of 23 to process. Okay, so after the first year, I'm going to get serious. I'm going to start training for the DELF. And so, come January, I upped meeting with Tebow from once a week to twice a week. Um, and we started one of a 2-book series for prep.
Mhm.
And in April, he said to me, "Now, when is the DELF again?" And at this point, I had just signed up for the DELF B2
Right.
in June. And because I told him, I said, "Good news, I'm registered. It's a go." He goes,
Oh, did he
"Okay."
forget about it in the meantime? What happened?
He said, "When is it?" This is the funniest part. This is the
Right.
part where I was like, "Oh la 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 la." I said, "It's June." I can't remember what day. It was like June 6th or something like that. It's early June. He said, "Oh, you're not going to be ready by then. I thought you said it was September." I was like, "Tebow, they don't offer it in September. I'm registered. I'm taking it." He
Yeah.
goes, he goes, "Okay, well, we on Vera, we'll see." So, he said, "Okay, I've been thinking. I think you need to hire another tutor, in addition to him, not
Right.
instead of him." So I hired another tutor, a second tutor.
Did you get
Um,
someone who specialized in the DELF?
yes,
Because
yes,
that sounded important at that point.
specialize in the DELF, and his name is Kevin. And
hmm
so I started with him about 30 days until the DELF.
Wow. Okay.
So
So it's heating up at this point.
I met with Kevin twice a week, Tebow twice a week, and then I
So
did
4 French classes. Yeah.
a week. Yeah. And then I did intense stuff on the days I didn't have them. I did intense stuff when I did have them, but I kept it up on the days I didn't have
Right.
them. So with Tebow, I would work through this prep book we were doing and really more on just getting my grammar. With Kevin, um, Kevin is Swiss, but a native French speaker. He lives in Indonesia, so that was an interesting time difference to coordinate. But Kevin was quite a bit younger than me and had a different style than Tebow. So it was interesting, the shock of
Hmm.
the two styles, but it worked. And with Kevin, we mainly decided to focus on my weakest area, which
Right.
was speaking, as I mentioned before, but
Hmm.
that oral, the debate, the oral
Right. Yes.
debate. So every time I met with Kevin, I had to prepare and I looked up practice questions or you
Right.
know, even from past DELFs, but I would prepare two different paroles, two different debates, and Kevin would, after I'd do my little speech, he would ask me questions and try to kind of poke holes
So
into it.
wait, you did 4 of those per week, 2 for each session you had with him? Wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's more than I've ever made anyone do. Maybe I should associate with like Kevin and or Thibaut. I'd have a good cop, bad cop situation. I
Well,
can do it if someone asks me. I mean, I think if you had come to me at that point and be like, I'm registered for the DELF in a month, I'm not ready at all. What can we do? Maybe we would have cooked up something like that because you got to do what you got to do, right?
right. It was a very intense practice. And
Yeah.
I felt like I was probably more ready than Tebow thought, but Tebow
Because Thibaut wasn't expecting you to just double down on the number of tutors, and I mean, he hadn't counted that.
he's never seen me in test mode.
Right.
So, I did that for I met with Tebow actually the day before I took the test. So I kept that up for 30 solid days. And then of course I ended up obviously in January I had to up the intensity of my French bath.
Right.
And so I
So
really made
what were you taking for French Bath at the time?
mostly I was using an app called Radio France, which
Mm-hmm.
is
Yep.
just an internet
Yep. It's
French.
also a website.
Yeah, and so I was listening to podcasts and just live when they
Mm-hmm.
would not have like not the stations with music, but the more
Right.
just discussion stations.
Right. So
I would
that's
listen to
really
that.
close to the kind of documents you have in B2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would probably 2.5 hours a day, I would say.
Wow.
Um an
Yeah,
hour and a
that's
half.
quite the commitment, right? You were working at the same time?
hmm hmm
Wow.
So I take a morning walk for an hour and a half,
Mm-hmm.
anyways, and so I would do that in my morning hour and a half walk, and then
Right.
at lunch for an hour, I would usually take another walk, and I would listen to that, um, and I that helped me a lot with the comprehension,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course I would supplement it just because I'm always on Instagram and YouTube and stuff, and I started following comedians in French,
Mm-hmm.
which gives you that, less polished language.
Right.
And I started
Who's
watching
your
the scene.
favorite or who are your favorite comedians in French?
Yeah.
Give some tips for our viewers, please. Which ones do
Um,
you like?
gosh, I can't remember. Franjo, I think, might be one of
Uh-huh.
his names. I watch
Right.
him a lot. And then I
Uh-huh.
started watching episodes on YouTube of the hot ones in French.
Oh yes. Yeah, yeah, I remember
And
that show. Well,
that that
we'll put all the links in the description
yeah,
for
that
people to
I
check.
Kevin gave me that suggestion. And so that was a very late stage ad,
Hmm.
but very entertaining
Right.
and very
Quite
helpful.
challenging to understand as well. I mean,
Mhm.
they speak fast and they're not thinking that anyone who's not a native is listening to them, so good
Right,
challenge.
right. So yeah, that brought me up to also in 30 days I started like maybe about 2 weeks out. I started I don't know if I recommend this, but this is what I did. I went on YouTube and started looking for people talking about their experiences on DELF, and then I started watching simulations. There's simulations on
Yep.
there of
Yeah,
DELF
quite a few,
B,
yeah.
and so I watched a couple of those, and I got terrified.
Oh, I'm
I just
sorry.
I just stopped that because it was so intense, which the DELF is intense, right? But the sim
Especially, I mean, when you get to B2, it gets intense, yeah.
Right. It is, and especially some of the simulations, which I kept telling myself, they're speaking perfect because this is simulation, so they've practiced.
Typically, it's also a teacher who's playing the role of the student because most students are terrified and don't want to be filmed. So it's not exactly realistic.
Right. And so I'd watch that and be like, I am nowhere like those people.
Right.
And if that's the expectation, this is not going to go well.
It's more like what you would have to do to get 100%, you know.
Right. 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 Um,
And you
so
only need 50% anyway. So you just need to be
correct.
half as good as the simulation.
You just have to make it
Yeah.
50 or more.
Yes.
And so the day before the test came, I had to drive to Chicago, and I stayed overnight so I wouldn't, have to get up really early for the test. And one of the things I did is I not for the whole 5 hours, but most of the 5 hours, I had a playlist, a pump up playlist. So mentally I was
Right.
like pumped up, and it was anything that I found motivating.
Were
Like,
you driving on the same day that you had the exam, or did you stay? Because normally it's in the morning, right?
yeah, so I went the day before.
Right.
So
Okay.
I stayed overnight. And then also, I, I couldn't hardly sleep because I was so nervous. So the morning of
Of
the
course.
exam, um, and I probably should have thought of this before, but I did it the morning of, nothing like the last minute. I thought, a lot of times on the written portion where you have to do the written épreuve,
Mhm.
um, you have to write a formal letter to a mayor
Yes.
about something.
Yes. It's often the written is a formal letter.
And I had practiced it, but sorta. And I was like, I really need to prepare in case in a couple hours, or it was several hours because I couldn't sleep, so I woke up at
Hmm.
crazy clock in the morning. That I'm asked to write this, so I looked up basically a template for a letter to the like
Oh,
how
you
you
had
can
never
start it.
seen a template before?
I had seen a template, but I just read it and tried to think about it, and really not occurred to me to memorize it. So
Oh,
I
yeah. I
quickly,
think I could have told you that,
yeah, I quickly looked
but
it
I
up and
wasn't there.
memorized
Right.
because the language, especially culturally as an American, it's very different
Yeah.
than I
And
would have
also they
thought.
really want the layout, which is different.
Hmm.
So yeah.
So I I wrote down a few of the opening sentences as far as you
Hmm.
could go
Yeah.
and be generic before you have to get into the topic.
Yep.
And I just memorized it. I mean, just
Which was
hours.
definitely a good idea, right?
Yes, I don't know that I would have passed if I had not done that. It would have been
He
close.
probably gave you a couple more points. So it
Yeah.
depends on how many points you had in the end.
Yeah, well, I'll show you that here in a second. But
Okay.
and you know, they come around, they look at your license, and it's all official. You go into this room. And in my head, I thought that I would have like maybe a computer, and I would have a headset where I was listening
Oh
to the.
no, that would be too good to be true. I could also have told you that, actually. It's actually, they're quite famous for the terrible acoustic of the rooms, which makes it worse than the exercises that you take. It's, yeah, I'm sorry. I
It's
apologize
okay.
on behalf of the French government.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, they lead you into this room, and it's a room with some long tables, and there
Yeah.
were, I think, like 10 or so of us, maybe 12. And we had to sit, far apart and
Yep.
everything, and
And
which
you
was.
have a paper, and they have a
Hmm.
CD player because it's the 20th century.
Well, this one they were playing it somehow. They were playing it through the TV's sound. They had a TV set up, but it wasn't showing anything. So
Right.
I guess they had an aux cord or something. So when I entered the room, at first I went towards the back, but then I quickly realized, oh, the sound's coming out up there. So I got as close to the TV as
Right.
I could.
Yeah.
Um,
Good move.
yeah, I was like, this is not gonna be a good seat. So I
Yes.
moved really quick because no one had taken that seat yet. And then they pass out blank paper
Hmm.
and the test booklet, and she tells you basic, and you had to leave all your belongings outside, which was
Right.
fine, except a
And
pen,
right.
and you start with the listening, and you open your test booklet, and it just starts right in, and the
Yep.
acoustics, like you said, are terrible,
I don't know
and
why, but it's consistent across the world. Every single room where you take the DELF, the acoustic is terrible. I'm not making it up.
no, you're not. You're not. Because I remember just being kind of like, what in the world? What did they, what?
Yeah.
Just, so, you know, we got through that, and I was like, well, that did not go like the Radio France I listened to every morning. That was that was much more difficult to
Hmm.
understand and listen to. And I think at that level, the B2, they probably try to find people with maybe um on the street that talk, so you have the
Yeah, it's
background
it's part
noise.
of the calibration that you tend to have a part that is like an actual radio show and a part where someone is interviewed. And it is even in the description that you have to find someone with an accent that's not quote unquote
Hmm.
standard. No accent is really standard, but we do have a certain idea of like the way that people talk on TV in France.
Hmm.
That's the standard accent. And find someone from Quebec or from Africa or from Belgium that has an accent that's different. And that's always part
Hmm.
of the delf like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that definitely happened. Um, and then the next two parts were basically you do on your own time. You are given a maximum time limit that, the test shuts down, you have to turn in everything. But the next part is the reading comprehension, and then you have the written.
The written, yeah,
Hmm.
it's
And
always in
then,
this order.
so as soon as I finished listening, I went to my scratch paper and I did a brain dump of that letter to the mayor that I'd memorized.
That you had learned in the morning. Great.
Yeah, because it was in
Did
the
you
very
look
short term
ahead
memory.
like at in the booklet? You noticed that you had the
No,
letter to
I
do?
I
No,
I didn't I
because
didn't even
it
like I
should
was
have
too.
been there, right?
It could have been something completely different, but yes, it was. I could have looked to see that, and
Right.
I was like, okay, I'm going to do this brain dump right now. And then also the other thing I did on my brain dump um, was there are certain phrases that you're expected, or certain types of phrases you're expected to work into the written and the oral approve, like that would demonstrate a B2 level.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
like
connectors and stuff like that.
right, right. So I had some of those in my head that I was like, okay, here are some. And
Hmm.
I don't know if I'll be able to use them, but here is
Right.
just some random stuff. Um, did the written um did the written comprehension, and then lo and behold, the written portion of the test was
Right.
the letter to the mayor.
Right.
Did that, had to count my words because there's a minimum word level.
Yep.
And what I ended up doing is did the entire letter on my scratch paper before I
Hmm.
did it in the test booklet because I had to add to it. And then I
Right.
went back to the written comprehension and checked my work and ended up changing some answers. So
Hmm.
hopefully I changed them right versus wrong.
Right.
And then
And
the oral.
then there was the afternoon and you had the oral, which is what we
Yeah.
all want to hear about. Quite frankly, it's
Yeah.
the worst part, right?
It was. So, the oral portion of the test, you are given basically an appointment.
Yep.
So I had allotted time for that, and it was about an hour after the end
Right.
of the written.
Did you have two people examining you, one taking notes and one quizzing you?
No, just one.
Oh,
But I
really?
did,
Interesting.
yeah.
Supposed to be two
So
normally.
I did when I got there, and it was the start of my time. I was taken to a room, um, and I was given. She had an envelope, and
Mm-hmm.
she said, "Fish out two pieces of
Right.
paper
You
from this
can fish
envelope."
out two and choose one of the two you have fished out.
Yes, and she
Yep.
said, "You don't have much time. Quickly read them and give me one
Mm-hmm.
back that you're not going to use." So I read the
Right.
first one, and right off the bat, there was a word that kept coming up over and over. I had no idea what it meant. Later, I looked it up. It was the verb to obey. But
Oh,
that's
over here. Uh-huh.
I
Interesting.
that in my mind, I was like, I don't know what that means, and it's on there at least twice. All
Yeah.
right, let's look at this one. Okay, I can understand what this means. This it is, and gave the other one back. And the topic was something like uh, parents these days. A lot of them are hiring coaches to help them with their children just for everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not, I'm not talking about psychologists, psychiatrists, but just like people that will tell them
Parenting
how to do
coaches.
everything.
Yeah.
And is this necessary,
Mm-hmm.
basically? And so I was given some time to, like 15 minutes or so, to
Yeah.
prepare. And I did have her, she was watching me the whole time
Yep.
writing. And I wrote out basically everything I thought I could say, and read it a few times, and then went to the room. And he was nice, but he was very serious looking, as you would
Oh,
expect.
yes. You are supposed to, otherwise you don't get the job.
Yeah, and it was definitely extraordinarily intimidating. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to give him my topic, and he said, "Oh yes," and he had I guess all the topics laid out, and he
Yep.
pointed to that one, and I basically it was go.
Yeah. So then
And
you had 20 minutes, 10
I
minutes to
did. So
speak,
I
and 10
think it
minutes of
was,
debate, right?
yeah. And so the first thing I did was I kind of summarized what
Yep.
it asked me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I gave my argument, which did
Yep.
not last very long. I just said exactly kind of what I thought. And then he asked me follow-up questions. And the whole thing uh, felt like it lasted. Whether it actually lasted, this is another thing. Felt like it lasted less than 10 minutes. And I thought to myself, oh,
That's,
that's probably not a good sign.
I don't think it lasted less than 10 minutes.
It was probably just my heart racing.
It's normally it's 20 minutes and they don't let you go before. And you passed, so it's not possible that they
Yeah.
have like if I guess if you're completely desperate and they're like, okay, there's no point to this, maybe they let you go. But you passed. You were in there 20 minutes, I promise you.
So he asked me some questions. Um I felt like I chopped it up and bumbled every word out of my mouth, and I got to a certain point where he just looked at me and said, "Okay, we're done." I was like,
All right.
"Oh, oh, that seems like us." The most.
Now I really want to know your grades.
So I'll show you. I'll share
Yeah,
my screen. Okay,
let's do that.
so this was the attestation, and it says basically who. I'm guessing this was the name of the person that I met with at the end, but I'm not sure.
Maybe, maybe not. It could be anyone who just has the job of being président du jury, and
Hmm.
so you don't know.
Yeah, and it says your name when you fill out the registration. It has you put your date of birth and
Right.
where you were born, which at the time I thought
It's
was,
very French. We do that a
yeah.
lot.
I thought that's kind of odd, but I did it. But now that I look back on it, it's not like I could put my social security number or any other identifier out of you in
Yeah,
the
I think it's
US.
also because people sometimes have names that are just not that rare.
Hmm.
So, in
Hmm.
case there would be another Andrea Price that was born on that same day anywhere in the world,
Hmm.
at least hopefully there isn't another one in Greenville, right?
Right, right. Which is funny because that was not my name when I was born, but you know, didn't ask that.
Still.
Um, and then they assign you this number.
Honestly, that's probably because in France you don't
You don't
legally
change
change
your
your
name.
name. Like you have a use name, so you use your husband's name, but that does not change your legal name.
Mm.
And they don't expect that to be the case in other countries, even though it is.
And then they assign you this candidate number, and I guess you have it for life. So if I were to decide, which
Probably.
I'm not, but if I decided I wanted to take the C1 or the
Oh, you
DELF,
could next year when Thibaut says you need a goal again. In 2 years, we do this recording again. Episode 3. Oh, Andrea
oh
got the
my
C1.
gosh.
You
I guess
never
I
know.
would have to I would need to put that on my registration, the number. So you keep
Right.
that. And this is
Yeah.
I
Présenter avec
kept reading
succès means
this.
you pass.
Yeah, I kept reading it over and over. It keeps saying success. So that means it's good. They wouldn't put
Yes.
that if it wasn't. And then this is the scores. Now, the scores,
54.5 out of 100.
yeah,
You
it's
passed. Congratulations. That's awesome.
it's I didn't have a lot of room to miss something, but you
4.5
have to
points.
make at least a 50.
Yep.
And within that, each
You
portion
need
you
to have
have
at
to
least 5 on each
right,
portion. Otherwise,
right,
yeah.
right. And so you see my
I see that
worst.
actually the production orale did not go too well.
No.
So maybe you were not in there for that very long. Maybe I have to like take back what I just said. But I mean,
And
9 out of 25 isn't too bad. It's more than 5. So
it is more
considering
than
that
5.
you can make up for it with the other ones, it's good. Like that's good enough. That's what we want to see. So yeah,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was my experience. And um so I told myself before I took it, everything hinged on these results, right? If I succeeded, then I was allowed to add another language for real this
Oh,
time.
wow. Okay. So what's your new language?
Spanish. I
Cool.
went back and forth between Spanish and Haitian Creole because my next language is I have used French in my work, but a little bit. My next language I really wanted to be more for my work, and so we have a growing population of people from Haiti in Ohio,
Mhm.
and I've used my French with
And
them.
it's a French-based Creole, right?
Hmm.
So it would help that you know French already
Right, but we have a large Spanish-speaking population,
as
and
well. Yeah.
so I decided to go with Spanish
Hmm.
because when I started looking at Haitian Creole, it almost was so similar that it was tripping me
Right.
up. Um, so
Spanish
there you
can be
go.
pretty similar to French. I mean, if you compare Spanish to English or to French, it's a lot more similar to French. A lot of the vocabulary is similar. The grammar is kinda like same-ish with, you know, how they deal with the tenses, the genders, things like that. So it will help you.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
there you go. Voila.
Congratulations. That's absolutely
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you.
I had written down that because each time I publish one of those case studies, I get someone being like, hey, you should make the person speak French so that we can see that they really speak French.
Yeah.
So I had written down to do that. And we're also going to link your podcast on there so they can have vast amounts of French speaking from you to check the evolution.
Yeah,
And yeah, like,
I wrote out and I'm prepared to talk a little bit about mon histoire en français.
OK, ton histoire en français, allons-y.
OK, mon histoire, 2 ans la langue française au lycée
Mhm,
et 2 ans la langue française à l'université. En grande pause,
mhm,
environ 21 ans. Um, et mon mari et moi avons choisi célébrer notre anniversaire de mariage, notre 21 ans.
Wow, félicitations. 21 ans de
À,
mariage.
ouais, à Paris. Mariage dans 1995. Non,
Mhm.
18. Alors, 20 ans, this would have been,
Non, 1998, ça fera
that's when we
seulement.
got married. So
Bah,
20
ça fait
years
pas
after.
21 ans. 20 ans après 1998, ça serait 2028. Non? Attends.
26
Oh non,
26.
2018. No, that's right. So en
Yeah.
2019, 21 ans de mariage.
Ouais, ouais.
Je sais pas faire des maths. Ok, donc en 2019, 21 ans de mariage, vous êtes allé célébrer votre anniversaire de mariage à Paris.
Uh-huh. Alors, en préparation,
Mhm.
j'ai recommencé à apprendre le français.
Oh, c'était ça la raison à la base pour recommencer à apprendre le français. Waouh! Et maintenant, 5 ans plus
Maintenant,
tard, tu as ton B2.
beta.
Bravo! Très
J'ai
impressionnant.
réussi!
Bravo! Wouhou.
So there you go. Voila, voila. So yeah, and then on the podcast, you can certainly see me butcher
Yep.
the beautiful French language.
We'll totally link that below. I'll just add one more questions or perhaps like a little like summary, see if you confirm that. It seems to me that the time that we worked together was kind of like a turning point in your French
Mhm.
study, in the sense that it really put you on a track to become more able to study by your own means later. Would you say that's true, or did I somehow got that
Definitely.
wrong?
No, definitely. I would say, since I had that time before trying to learn French in a classroom setting, um, I basically sort of tried to recreate that in that first year, and
Hmm.
it just wasn't working.
Right.
And I'm trying to sort of teach myself, that's just that's just not going to work. And so when I met with you, and I was in the time with the French Fluency Accelerator, it reframed it. It gave me
Yeah.
how to learn French on an individual way, and how to meet my own goals instead of,
Hmm.
whomever published
Right.
this book's goals.
Yes. Yeah, that's
And
really the cornerstone of the whole practice.
yeah, and it really helped me understand, you have to go at it at a multi dimensional way. You can't just have a book
Right.
that teaches you grammar
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you have it. You have to really um have like the French bath and the speaking practice and the listening is the French bath. But and a lot of, I think what I gained was I did, you know, have some of the grammar through the videos
Hmm.
with the French Fluency Accelerator, but I
Yeah.
think,
In the workshop library, right?
yeah,
There's a lot of grammar in there.
I think the community, and I mean, I'm still friends with a lot of the people I
Yep.
met through the French Fluency Accelerator, and just sharing resources and just practicing talking and preparing for that. That helped me a lot because
Hmm.
that gave me a mini goal every week when
Yeah.
I would come. Oh, I've got to prepare something for this, and we're going to
Now
hear
we've
what
we've
other people do.
upgraded that because we still have the workshop library, which is already
Hmm.
recorded, and I make occasionally new workshops. But now the key part of it is that we have 1 or 2 group sessions per week. At the moment, we have one every Sunday. So now you have to practice, and well, you
Yeah,
don't have to. It's like I would rather you show up in class even if you haven't done anything because it's better to be in class. But if you're a motivated person like you would definitely prepare, right?
right,
So yeah.
right. So that really helped me. And I, I'm not fluent. But I think that I don't know if I would ever consider myself fluent, even if I was, because I have a hard time believing I'm B2, but the French government
It's
says I am.
the French government said it. I mean, no, who are you to contradict the French government, right?
Right, right. But
But fluency is a feeling, really. Like
it
it's you
is.
feel fluent when you're able to be in, a context, language context, and you have no problem. That's when you're fluent. Like
Right,
we are currently fluent in English because we don't struggle with the English language as we are speaking.
right. So I guess the big test will be this kickoff of this podcast this season. Um,
Look
by the
forward
end of
to
it to
seeing that.
see. Yeah.
When does it start?
The 16th. So,
16th of August.
yeah, so about 2 weeks.
So,
Sure.
okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. Any words of the end you'd like to add for our viewers?
I think
This
that
was longer than I expected. So thank you for like all of the gold that you have shared and all of the like nuggets. That's awesome.
you may need to trim it a little bit, but
We'll see.
if I had to give short advice, this is my mantra. This has been my mantra basically since this year. And I wish I had had this mantra the whole time. Be patient,
Yep.
be consistent, and trust the process.
Absolutely. Those are three very good pieces of advice. Be patient, consistent, and trust the process. Well,
Yes.
especially if you have a good process, like if you know you have a process that's been proven, like the
Mhm.
roadmap to fluency, not to toot my own horn, but this is my YouTube channel after all. And the process has been proven to work, evidence,
Right. Right.
evidence right here, right? Like,
Right. And I think if
so yeah,
you can use that with everything in life,
yeah, absolutely.
health and everything, just if you have a proven process, trust that people
Yeah.
have looked into this
As
and
long
just
as
follow it.
as long as you're sure that you're the kind of person that the process has been designed for, like my process is entirely designed for English natives. If you would pick a
Right.
process that was designed for natives of a different language, it may or may not, it might be a bit hit or miss, but yeah, if it was designed for the kind of person you are, then that's what you need to trust. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Voila.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That was awesome to have you.